I want you to picture a piece of technology that is, in its fundamental design, older than the Roman Empire.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, picture an ancient wooden fence, and it's spanning this remote, just rushing river right on Canada's Pacific coast.
Right.
The water is freezing, it's moving incredibly fast, and this fence has been engineered over centuries by the people who live there just to withstand the sheer, brutal force of that current.
It's quite an image.
It really is. But now, I want you to look a little closer at that ancient wood, right at the center where the water funnels through this narrow gate.
Okay.
Strapped directly to that 1,000-year-old infrastructure is a solar-powered, high-definition, deep-learning artificial intelligence camera.
I mean, it is just such a striking image to hold in your mind, isn't it?
It really is.
It's basically the visual definition of two completely different eras of human ingenuity colliding. And the fascinating thing is that they aren't clashing at all.
No, they're not.
Right. They are working together in this perfectly integrated system.
And, well, that image is the foundation of our deep dive today. We have a really fantastic stack of materials to get through.
We do, yeah.
We are looking at a 2023 peer-reviewed paper published in Frontiers in Marine Science, and that details a project known as SalmonVision.
Right, the SalmonVision paper.
Exactly. We're also pulling from the primary materials published by the partner organizations themselves, along with a collection of reputable press reports covering the whole rollout of this system.
So a really solid mix of sources.
Definitely. So whether you are prepping for a meeting or trying to catch up on environmental tech, or you are just insanely curious about how ancient traditions meet modern science, you're going to want to hear this.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this. What is the actual mission of looking at this stack of research today?
Well, our mission today is to explore how marrying this 1,000-year-old fishing technology with cutting-edge AI goes far beyond simply counting fish more accurately.
Right.
I mean, though it certainly accomplishes that. But we are really looking at a massive shift in authority here.
A shift in authority, yeah.
Exactly. This is a story about fundamentally reshaping who controls the data and ultimately who gets to make the rules about our natural resources.
Because it's not just a science experiment.
No, not at all. We're looking at how First Nations on British Columbia's coast are using this integrated technology to decide their own harvests in near real time.
Which is huge.
It is. They're essentially bypassing a century-old bureaucratic system.
So to really understand why strapping a deep learning camera to a wooden river fence is so revolutionary, we have to start with the physical technology itself, right? The weir.
Yes, the weir. It's foundational.
Because for thousands of years, Pacific Coast First Nations have built these structures.
Yeah.
Historically, they were made of wooden stakes and lattice driven deep into the riverbed.
Right, and today they might sometimes use steel or modern netting, but the core function is entirely identical.
They span the entire river channel, leaving one or more narrow gates for the water to pass through. But wait, if it spans the whole river, doesn't that just, block the fish from swimming upstream to spawn?
You know, that is a really common misconception, but no, it doesn't block them at all.
Okay, how does it work then?
So when the salmon are swimming upstream from the ocean, returning to their home rivers, they eventually meet this fence. But instead of being stopped completely, the current and the structure gently guide them.
Kind of like a funnel.
Exactly like a funnel. It guides them, totally unhurried, toward that narrow viewing gate.
Okay, I see.
And for coastal First Nations, the weir has always been much more than just a trap or a way to catch fish. It is this ancient piece of infrastructure that allows communities to harvest selectively.
Selectively, right.
Yeah, the design means they can take exactly the fish they need for the community, release the rest unharmed to continue their migration, and crucially, they can stand at that gate and watch the entire run go by.
Which brings us to a really fundamental rule of how human beings interact with nature, which is you cannot manage what you cannot see.
That is the core philosophy here.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of resource stewardship, a weir is actually a machine for seeing salmon.
I love that phrasing. A machine for seeing.
Right. It takes an entire river's chaotic, hidden migration and concentrates it into a single, highly visible, countable stream.
And this is where the AI comes in, and why this specific marriage of old and new is so elegant. Because I would imagine that trying to count wild salmon with cameras in a normal open river is just a total nightmare.
Oh, it's nearly impossible.
Because the fish are moving fast.
Yeah.
Right, they're darting around, the water is murky, full of bubbles and debris.
Exactly.
And the fish overlap each other, or they do that thing called milling.
Yes, milling is a huge problem for AI.
Which is when they just sort of swim in circles going back and forth, right?
Yeah.
Making it impossible to know if you just saw 5 different fish or the same fish 5 times.
You nailed it. The environmental variables alone make automated counting incredibly difficult in an open river.
I can imagine.
Because computer vision models, inherently, they thrive on consistency. They perform best when they have clean, distinct shapes, predictable lighting, and subjects moving in a linear fashion.
Like cars on a highway.
Exactly. But an untamed rushing river in the Pacific Northwest is the exact opposite of a controlled environment.
Right.
You have shadows from the trees, you have changing turbidity in the water from rainfall, and multiple species of fish moving erratically.
It makes me think about how we process information in other fields, honestly. It's almost like the weir acts as a physical algorithm for data normalization.
That's a really great way to put it.
Like if you're a data scientist, you don't just throw raw, chaotic data into a machine learning model. You clean the data set first.
Right. You structure it.
Exactly. It sounds like the ancestors essentially built a physical structure to clean the river's chaotic data into a structured format before anyone even knew what a computer was.
They absolutely did.
I think of it like a highly efficient red carpet photo op, or maybe a stadium turnstile.
Turnstile, yeah.
If you want to count every person entering a giant arena, you don't just point a camera at the chaotic parking lot. You funnel everyone through a turnstile where they have to walk in single file, slowly. And then the AI just has to sit at the gate and watch.
That is a brilliant analogy. The weir is the physical normalization of the data. And what's fascinating here is the philosophical elegance of that relationship.
How so?
Well, the deep learning technology doesn't have to replace the tradition or reinvent the wheel. It literally plugs right into it.
Right.
William Husty, who is the Associate Director of the Heiltsuk Integrated Resource Management Department, or HIRMD, he captured this beautifully in the sources.
What he said?
Speaking about the weir on the Kauai River, which is situated in the Great Bear Rainforest on the Central Coast, he called it a modern-day expression of Heiltsuk title and rights, integrated with an avenue to be part of the latest science.
I really love that framing. It's not the tech disrupting the old way, it's the old way empowering the tech.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's get under the hood of SalmonVision itself. How does this system actually do the counting? Because the actual pipeline doing the heavy lifting here is serious business.
It is very serious business.
The sources outline a 2-stage deep learning pipeline fed by underwater high-definition video. Can you walk us through how stage 1 actually works?
Absolutely. So the first stage is entirely focused on detection. The SalmonVision project uses object detection models from a family of algorithms known as YOLO.
YOLO.
Yeah, that acronym stands for You Only Look Once.
You only look once. Okay, how does that differ from how other AI models look at an image?
Well, older or different types of image recognition models often use what's called a sliding window approach.
Okay.
Imagine taking a small magnifying glass and scanning it across a photograph row by row, looking for a specific shape.
It sounds slow.
It is. It is thorough, but it is incredibly slow and computationally heavy. YOLO models, on the other hand, look at the entire image frame all at once in a single pass.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they divide the image into a grid and simultaneously predict where bounding boxes should be and what the probability is that a box contains a specific class of object.
Which in this case is a specific species of salmon.
Exactly. And because it processes the whole image in one go, it is phenomenally fast, which is absolutely critical for real-time video processing.
That makes total sense for video,
Yeah.
because you have 30 or 60 frames per second to analyze.
Right.
But I noticed in the research paper, they specifically tested versions called YOLOV 4 Tiny, YOLOV 5, YOLOV 6, and YOLOV 7 Tiny. What is with the tiny suffix? Why are they using miniature versions of these models?
That really comes down to the physical reality of where these cameras are located. We are talking about remote locations in the Canadian wilderness.
Oh, right. There's no power grid.
Exactly. There is zero power grid. These systems have to run entirely on solar power and battery banks.
Got it.
If you try to run a massive, highly complex neural network, you need massive computing power. You need large graphics processing units that consume a tremendous amount of electricity.
Which you just don't have out there.
No. So the tiny models are designed for what is known as edge AI.
Hey, Jay.
Yes. They are lightweight algorithms optimized to run on low-power devices right at the edge of the network, meaning right there on the riverbank, without needing to send the video to a distant cloud server to be analyzed first.
That's incredibly efficient.
It is. They basically trade a tiny bit of absolute precision for a massive gain in efficiency and low power consumption.
Okay, so the camera sees a fish, The YOLO tiny model processes the whole frame instantly, draws a bounding box, and says, hey, I think that's a sockeye.
Right?
But going back to that milling problem we discussed earlier, fish don't just swim straight through like cars on a highway. They linger.
They absolutely do.
They might swim halfway through the gate, get spooked by a shadow or maybe a seal downstream, and then swim right back out.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
So if the AI is just drawing boxes on every single frame, isn't it going to count that same fish 100 times?
Yes, and that would make the data completely useless for actual fisheries management. Because if a manager thinks 1,000 fish have passed, but it was really just 10 fish swimming back and forth, they might authorize a harvest that just devastates the run.
Which would be catastrophic.
Exactly. And that is why stage 2 is mandatory, which is tracking. The system uses a multi-object tracking model, specifically a joint detection and embedding approach built on a YOLO-3 tiny backbone.
Okay, joint detection and embedding. What does that actually mean in practice?
In practice, it means the system isn't just drawing a box. It is analyzing the pixels within that box to create a unique mathematical signature for that specific fish.
Oh, wow. Like a fingerprint.
Basically, yeah. It looks at the color variations, the exact shape, the movement trajectory. It embeds that visual information into a specific identity.
That's wild.
Its entire job is to link those bounding boxes across multiple frames of video over time. It assigns an ID number to that specific fish shape so that as the fish lingers, retreats, or finally pushes through the gate, the system understands it's the same entity.
So it doesn't double count.
Right. It tracks the trajectory, and only when the fish fully crosses a designated line in the frame does the output register a running species-specific tally.
Getting an AI to understand what a coho salmon looks like compared to a Chinook salmon underwater, especially when they are moving and the lighting is changing constantly, that must take a monumental amount of teaching.
It does.
How did they actually train this model to know the difference between all these species?
The scale of the training data they fed this model is just staggering, and it required an immense amount of human labor.
I can imagine.
The model learned from 1,567 different underwater salmon videos.
Wow.
Yeah, and that translates to roughly 532,000 labeled frames.
Wait, meaning human beings had to sit at a computer, manually go into those frames and draw a box saying, this is a coho, this is a pink, over 500,000 times.
Exactly that.
That sounds exhausting.
It is a grueling, meticulous process called data annotation. And it actually goes further than just the fish. We can't forget the negative frames.
Negative frames.
Yes. The model was also fed on the order of 1 million empty frames.
Why do you need to show the AI empty water? I mean, shouldn't it just be looking for fish?
Well, because you have to teach the machine learning algorithm what isn't a fish. This is absolutely crucial for reducing false positives.
Oh, I see.
A rushing river is full of debris. If you only show the AI pictures of fish, it will try to find a fish in every frame.
Right, it's just eager to please.
Exactly. Every time a strangely shaped piece of driftwood floats by or a large cluster of bubbles passes the lens, the system might tally it as a salmon.
That makes sense.
So by feeding it 1 million frames of empty water, bubbles, logs, and shifting shadows, the model learns the baseline environment.
Wow. Where did they even get all that footage?
This massive data set was drawn mostly from the Quinhagak and Bear River Weirs, which are situated in the Skeena watershed in British Columbia.
Okay.
The Quinhagak is a middle Skeena tributary, and the Bear is up in the upper Skeena and Saskatchewan region.
The geographic detail matters, definitely, because the water conditions and the specific runs of fish look different in different watersheds, right?
You absolutely do.
And the model wasn't just looking for one generic fish shape, was it?
No, not at all. It was trained on an incredibly ambitious scope. It used 15 different class labels spanning 12 distinct species.
12 species.
Yeah, we are talking about all the major Pacific salmon species: sockeye, coho, chinook, pink, chum plus steelhead, jack salmon, which are precocious males that return early bull trout, rainbow trout, whitefish, northern pike minnow, and even Pacific lamprey.
That is a massive catalog for a lightweight edge AI to hold. But whenever we discuss artificial intelligence on this show, we really have to look closely at the reality of the accuracy.
Always.
Because it's so easy to get swept up in the magic of the tech, but the sources here provide a very honest, nuanced look at the numbers. Across all those 12 classes, the best model achieves an accuracy metric of 67.6% AP50.
Yes, the MAP50 metric. It's the gold standard for object detection.
Before we get into whether that number is good or bad, what does MAP50 actually mean in plain English? Because if I see 67.6%, My instinct is to think it gets the fish right 2/3 of the time. Is that accurate?
It is a bit more complex than a simple percentage of correct guesses.
Okay.
The acronym stands for Mean Average Precision, and the 50 refers to a threshold called intersection over union, or IOU, set at 50%.
Intersection over union. Let's break that down.
Think of it this way. When the human annotator drew a box around the fish in the training data, that is considered the ground truth box.
Right. The perfect answer.
Exactly. When the AI looks at new video, it draws its own predicted box. The intersection over union is simply how much those two boxes overlap.
Oh, I get it.
If they overlap by at least 50%, the AI's detection is considered a valid match.
Okay, that makes sense.
The mean average precision then takes the average of how well the model performed across all the different species classes, balancing both its ability to find all the fish, which is called recall, and its ability to ensure the fish it found were the correct species, which is precision.
Gotcha.
So an overall MAP50 of 67.6% is a blended score of its total performance.
Okay, I have to push back here for a second.
Go for it.
If I got a 67 on a test, I would consider that an F, or maybe a D- if the teacher was feeling really generous.
That's fair.
I certainly wouldn't be put in charge of the food supply with a 67. If the whole point of this project is that First Nations are going to use this data to make crucial, real-world decisions about how many fish they can safely harvest to feed their communities, how on earth is a 67.6% overall accuracy good enough?
You know, that is a completely fair question, and it is one the researchers themselves address very candidly in the paper.
Okay, what's their take?
The 67.6% is an average across everything, and it hides a very divided reality within the data.
Meaning some are much higher than others.
Exactly. The good news is that for the specific species that matter most for management and human harvest, the system scored incredibly well.
Like which ones?
Coho salmon hit roughly 90% average precision, and sockeye were around 84%. Yeah, in fact, the Wild Salmon Center and some of the press summaries often round these figures up, stating the model is greater than 90% accurate for coho and greater than 80% for sockeye.
Okay, so when it's looking for the specific fish that the communities are actively relying on for food and cultural sustenance, it is highly accurate.
Yes.
Why does the overall average drop so low then?
Because rarer or harder to identify classes lagged badly, and that just drags the mathematical average down. Pink salmon, for instance, hovered in the 35 to 48% accuracy range.
Huh. Why are pink salmon so much harder for the AI to identify than sockeye?
It often comes down to the physical characteristics of the fish in the water combined with the volume of training data.
Right.
Sockeye often have very distinct physical profiles and colorations when they are returning to spawn. Pinks can be smaller. They might blend in more with the riverbed and the specific lighting of these videos, or there simply might have been fewer perfectly clear examples of them in the training data compared to the massive runs of sockeye.
That makes total sense.
This variance really tells us that this is a first-generation tool. It is an evolving model, not a finished, flawless oracle.
And it still requires a human touch, doesn't it? Like the AI isn't just left alone in the wild to make assumptions and automatically publish a harvest quota.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
The system is designed to augment human intelligence, not replace it.
Right.
Consider the 2022 live field test at the Bear River Weir, which is detailed in the sources. Initially, the automated tracker in the software caught only about 60% of the fish that a human observer physically sitting at the weir expected to see.
Wait, only 60%. That is a huge miss. That would mean undercounting the run by nearly half.
It would be disastrous for management. But the human operators didn't just accept the machine's output.
What did they do?
They went into the software and actively tuned the tracking threshold, adjusting the strictness of how the AI links those bound boxes together from frame to frame.
Oh, so they tweak the settings on the fly.
Exactly. They tweaked the parameters based on their own real-world observations. And after that human tuning, the system get roughly 91% accuracy, ultimately counting 7,500 out of an expected 8,200 fish.
That is a massive improvement.
It really is. It requires human collaboration, deep local knowledge, and active management to reach its potential.
So if they get the accuracy up to 90%, who actually owns that 90% accurate data?
Now, that is the real question.
Right. Does it go back to the government? Because this perfectly brings us to the human and political side of this story.
Yes, it does.
We've talked about the elegance of the weir and the deep learning pipeline of SalmonVision. But let's shift from the technology itself to the geopolitical impact. Because reading through these sources, it becomes totally clear this isn't just an engineering story about computer vision.
Yeah, not at all.
It is a story about reversing a century-long flow of data and returning absolute authority back to the riverbank.
To really understand the magnitude of this shift, we have to firmly establish the old paradigm of fisheries management.
Let's do it.
For roughly a century, the flow of data and the resulting authority ran in exactly one direction: outward and upward.
Outward and upward, meaning away from the community.
Exactly. If fish were counted at all on these remote rivers, it was usually by methods, protocols, and staff tied to distant federal or regional agencies. In Canada, that primarily means the DFO, Fisheries and Oceans Canada. In Alaska, it's the Alaska Department of Fish and Game.
How does that centralized system actually work in practice, like before this tech?
Historically, these distant agencies would rely on a patchwork of data. They might use test fisheries out in the ocean or at the mouth of a massive river system, or they might rely heavily on historical models and postseason catch reports.
So they're basically guessing based on old info.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
And even if data was collected locally at a weir, that raw data would travel hundreds or thousands of miles away to a capital city or a regional headquarters in Ottawa or Juneau to be processed by government scientists.
And the decisions about whether a local First Nation community could fish their own river or how much they could fish would eventually come back down the chain of command to them.
Yes. And those decisions were often very problematic for the local communities.
Why is that?
Because the distant agencies were managing massive, complex ecosystems with delayed data, their decisions were frequently incredibly conservative to avoid overfishing.
Which makes sense from a distance, but...
But on the ground, sometimes the decisions came back late in the season. Sometimes they came too late to fish a healthy, robust run at all, meaning the community missed out on vital food.
That's incredibly frustrating.
The community living on the river, the people whose ancestors had managed that specific run for millennia, were rendered entirely dependent on a bureaucracy sitting far away looking at delayed spreadsheets.
But the climate reality right now is shattering that old paradigm, isn't it?
It completely is.
You can't just manage a salmon run by looking at historical averages from the 1990s or the 2000s anymore. I was really struck by a quote from Dr. Will Atlas in the materials. He is the senior watershed scientist at the Wild Salmon Center and the lead author of the SalmonVision paper.
Yes, his insights are vital here.
He stated flatly, every year is unprecedented now.
That is a chilling but incredibly accurate assessment of the ecological landscape.
Yeah.
The water temperatures in the rivers are changing rapidly. The ocean conditions where the salmon spend most of their adult lives are shifting, and drought conditions are altering river flow dynamics constantly.
So the past is just not a good predictor anymore.
Exactly. Historical models are breaking down because the history they were built on simply no longer exists.
Which means fisheries managers desperately need to know what is happening while the fish are actually coming home. Right. They need in-season data, not a post-season autopsy report 3 months later. And this is where SalmonVision completely inverts the historical flow of authority. Let's look at the Heiltsuk Nation's deployment in 2023 at the Koe River Weir.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
This is the human story in the research that really drives the point home for me.
The Koe River deployment is the perfect case study. The Heiltsuk Nation set this system up comprehensively. They constructed the traditional weir, they installed the solar panels and the camera systems, and crucially, they established a satellite uplink for immediate data transmission from this incredibly remote location.
So they are completely off the grid but totally connected.
Yes, and they maintained round-the-clock monitoring of the system.
And because that data was near real time, and most importantly, because that data was held locally by the nation's own resource management department, the Heiltsuk confidently opened an in-season sockeye harvest for their people. They didn't have to wait for a distant agency to issue a press release telling them it was safe. The camera sat on their river, at their weir. The highly accurate count was generated locally by the AI and tuned by their people, and the decision was made on the riverbank by the descendants of the people who have stewarded that river since time immemorial.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the impact of that local authority is just profound. It translates directly into community food sovereignty.
Food sovereignty, yeah.
Because of that locally generated, highly accurate data, the nation knew the run was strong enough to support a harvest. Roughly 500 sockeye salmon were sustainably harvested and distributed throughout the community.
That's amazing.
They provided 3 sockeye per household for the elders, ensuring the most vulnerable were cared for, and 2 for other households.
Going back to William Husty of the Heiltsuk Nation, he noted in the press materials how people were, quote, so darn excited to get 3 sockeye.
Yeah.
It's such a small human detail, but it perfectly encapsulates the massive geopolitical shift happening here.
It really does.
It's not just about a computer drawing boxes around fish. It's about elders getting traditional food that they might have otherwise been denied by a slow-moving bureaucracy.
Jean Vierdoir of the Skeena Fisheries Commission, who is also a co-author on the SalmonVision paper, summarized the ultimate impact of this technology brilliantly. He simply said, it gives them independence.
Independence. That fundamentally reframes the role of indigenous nations in modern conservation, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
For so long, under the old centralized paradigm, communities were often treated merely as data sources. Scientists would fly in, take knowledge or measurements, and just fly out.
Or worse, the communities were treated merely as subjects of distant oversight and enforcement.
Right. But this project's own materials describe the nations differently. They're described as leaders on the ground in applying these tools for stewardship, representing a reemergence of indigenous-led monitoring.
It transforms the artificial intelligence from an instrument of state oversight into a localized tool of empowerment.
And that transformation leads us directly into a very complex and frankly unresolved debate about digital data.
This is where things get really complicated.
Because once you are generating near real-time, highly accurate, incredibly valuable data about a vital natural resource, the immediate next question is, who owns it?
Exactly.
This brings us to the formal concept of indigenous data sovereignty. This is a huge topic in modern environmental science, and the sources touch on it carefully. We are talking about CARE and OTIAP principles.
Yes, CARE and OTIAP.
For anyone listening who isn't familiar with these frameworks, they are fundamental to how data is handled today regarding indigenous lands and peoples. I know the broad strokes, but can you walk us through what these acronyms actually demand in practice? Let's start with OEPA.
Sure. So OCPA is a foundational set of principles developed by the First Nations Information Governance Center in Canada. It stands for ownership, control, access, and possession.
Ownership, control, access, possession. Okay, break those down.
Ownership asserts that a community or group owns information collectively in the exact same way that an individual owns their personal information.
Makes sense.
Control means First Nations have the right to seek control over all aspects of research and information management processes that impact them.
Right.
Access ensures that First Nations must have access to information and data about themselves and their communities, regardless of where it is actually held.
Okay.
And finally, possession is the physical control of the data. It asserts that data should ideally be held within First Nation jurisdiction.
Okay, so that's OCAP. And what about CARE? How does that differ?
The CARE principles for Indigenous data governance are complementary but slightly broader, often applied globally. CARE stands for collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics.
Okay, let's go through those.
Collective benefit means data ecosystems should be designed to derive benefit for Indigenous peoples. Authority to control recognizes Indigenous rights to determine how their data are governed. Responsibility means those working with Indigenous data must be directly accountable to those communities.
That accountability is key.
It is. And ethics demands that Indigenous people's rights and well-being are the primary concern at all stages of the data life cycle.
So the core idea behind all of this seems to be power.
Unquestionably.
A count of salmon is never just a neutral number on a spreadsheet. Whoever holds the count holds the lever over who fishes, when they fish, and how much economic or cultural value they can take from the river.
Exactly.
By integrating the AI counting apparatus directly into their own traditional weirs, these nations are asserting physical possession and control over the data. They are gaining the authority that technology had previously concentrated in distant government offices.
This raises an important question, however, when we look at the specific roadmap for the SalmonVision project.
Right, I know what you're going to say.
The sources reveal what we can call the open source paradox.
Let's get into this because this jumped out at me immediately in the literature. In 2025, the project partners plan to roll out web platforms that will host these computer vision tools.
Right.
And they aren't just doing it for RGB video from Weirs. They are expanding it to include sonar data and aerial drone data. And the stated plan is to release these powerful tools under open licenses, specifically mentioning MIT and Creative Commons licenses.
Now, From a purely scientific, academic collaboration standpoint, that sounds fantastic.
Sure.
Open source software accelerates development. It allows researchers globally to benefit from the code, improve it, and adapt it for other rivers or even other species.
Right. Rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it introduces a massive unresolved tension when it collides with the principles of data sovereignty we just discussed.
Exactly. Wait, sorry. Let me rephrase that. If the primary goal, as we just established, is keeping data on the riverbank to protect local authority and OCA principles, how does making the software open source square with a nation's control over its own river's footage?
That is the big question.
Doesn't the word open imply that anyone, anywhere, like a commercial fishing fleet or a distant federal regulator or literally a random person on the internet, can just log on and look at what's happening on the Kauai or the Quinhagak rivers?
It is arguably the defining tension of the entire SalmonVision initiative right now. The technology itself is deeply empowering, but the legal and philosophical framework of data governance in this specific open source space is still being written in real time.
It feels very untested.
It is. If we look impartially at the public materials and the peer-reviewed paper provided in our sources, they are actually quite thin on the exact mechanics of this relationship.
The fine print is just missing.
It really is.
No.
The foundational questions remain largely unanswered in the provided text. Who legally owns the raw underwater video footage once it hits a cloud server to run through an open source platform?
Right.
Who owns the model outputs, the daily counts of the fish? What are the actual legally binding sharing agreements with those distant agencies like DFO or the Pacific Salmon Foundation who might be funding or partnering on the research?
We just don't know.
We don't. The public materials gesture broadly toward independence and equitable partnership. But the exact legal mechanics of how a First Nation maintains absolute sovereignty, possession, and control over an open source data stream are not fully detailed in the provided literature. It is an area that is notably underspecified.
And it's not just the legal mechanics that represent a hurdle for this movement, is it? There is the very real physical challenge of funding and scaling this infrastructure.
Oh, the logistics are immense.
We are talking about building and maintaining wooden or steel weirs in raging rivers that endure massive winter storms.
Yeah, nature is not gentle out there.
Not at all. And we are talking about buying high-definition cameras, paying for continuous satellite uplinks in completely remote wilderness areas, and funding the immense human labor required to annotate 500,000 frames of video and actively tune the AI models in season.
Exactly. A successful grant-funded pilot program on 2 or 3 rivers is one thing. But whether this can become durable, permanent infrastructure across dozens or hundreds of remote watersheds, and crucially, who foots the bill for it long-term once the initial research grants run out, remains a very significant open question.
Because the partners listed on this project span a very wide spectrum of geography and resources. You have deep co-development partners who have already deployed systems, like the Heiltsuk at Kauai, the Gittinau Fisheries Authority at Kitwanga, and the Skeena Fisheries Commission at Bear River.
Right.
But the project documentation also acknowledges many other nations, like the Kitasuz-Isis, the Nuksalk, the Wikinaktiv, the Haida, and the Gitsin.
Yes.
Their involvement ranges from contributing historical data to planning future pilot programs.
Yes.
Expanding robust, sovereign, tech-enabled infrastructure to all those diverse territories will require immense financial and logistical resources.
And yet, despite those hurdles, the momentum is undeniable.
It really is.
This desire to return the count and the authority to the local community isn't just happening with weirs and underwater cameras in British Columbia. It is part of a much broader movement happening across the Pacific coast, adapting whatever technology best fits the specific landscape and the specific community.
Which brings us to a really fascinating parallel case study in our sources. Let's move our focus north, out of British Columbia, all the way up to Alaska's Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta.
Yes, let's talk about Alaska. Up there, we have the Yupik community of Quinhagak.
Quinhagak, okay.
Through their community-owned company, Nalakwak, LLC, they are also deeply engaged in monitoring salmon, specifically on the Quinhagak River, but they face a very different geographical reality, so they aren't using traditional river-spanning weirs.
No, they are taking to the sky.
They're
using drones. Instead of funneling the fish through a wooden gate in the water, local technicians from the community are flying high-resolution UAVs drones in carefully timed increments right over the shallow spawning reaches of the river system.
It's a completely different approach.
It is. These drones are essentially acting as flying data centers, They are logging water levels, they are recording river temperatures, and they are capturing incredibly detailed aerial imagery of the fish swimming in the river below.
But the hardware itself, the drone, isn't what makes this a profound parallel to the SalmonVision project.
What is it then?
What really matters is how they are layering that modern aerospace technology with deep generational traditional knowledge.
How so?
Mm.
Like, how do they know where to fly these drones across miles and miles of wilderness river to actually find the salmon?
Well, they don't just guess, and they definitely don't rely on outside academics to tell them where the fish ought to be.
Okay.
The technicians in Quinhagak take this cutting-edge drone imagery, and they pair it directly with hand-drawn maps created by the community.
And drawn maps.
Yes. These maps are heavily annotated in Yupik place names, utilizing the community's profound knowledge of exactly where specific species of salmon have historically chosen to run and spawn over centuries. So the traditional knowledge literally acts as the targeting system for the modern technology.
There was a quote from an advisor on the project, Sean Gleason, that completely nails the shared ethos between these two projects.
I think I know the one you mean.
Speaking about the drone initiative, he simply says, "This project is all about local knowledge."
Yes, that's it.
Just like the ancient weir down in British Columbia acting as the perfect bottleneck for an AI, the drone project in Alaska is fundamentally about advanced sensing technology placed firmly in indigenous hands.
The outcomes are identical in their purpose. It generates local data for local decisions. Furthermore, in the case of Quinhagak, the project is creating local jobs and providing official drone pilot certifications for community members.
Which is fantastic for the local economy.
Exactly. It is the exact same turn of the dial. The count, the data, and the capability are all moving home to the riverbank.
So as we wrap up this massive exploration, what does this all mean for you listening to this?
It's a really important question to land on.
We so often fall into this trap of thinking about new technology, especially artificial intelligence, as just a tool for gathering more data or gathering it faster.
Right, just maximizing throughput.
Yeah, we think of it purely as an optimization tool for efficiency. But this deep dive really shows the technology's highest, most impactful purpose might not be about the data itself. It might actually be about changing who gets to hold the clipboard.
It is entirely about changing the direction the information flows.
Yeah.
Whether it is a 1,000-year-old weir acting as the elegant physical normalization algorithm for a deep learning neural network, or a drone flying over an Alaskan river guided by a Yupik hand-drawn map, the hardware is almost secondary.
The hardware is just a means to an end.
Exactly. What truly matters is that the communities who have stewarded these vital resources the longest are the ones being empowered by the data.
We've tracked an incredible journey today. We started with the physical brilliance of the ancient weir, explored the complex mechanics of YOLO bounding boxes and edge AI under the hood, and saw how all of this leads to a profound shift in food sovereignty and data independence for First Nations.
Even as they continue to navigate the unresolved legalities and funding hurdles of open-source data platforms.
Right, because the story isn't over yet.
No, it's just beginning. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on what we've discussed regarding the environmental crisis.
Okay, let's hear it.
We established early on, through Dr. Will Atlas, that climate change is making every single salmon run unprecedented.
Yeah, the old normal is gone.
The historical models used by centralized agencies are breaking down rapidly. So as the environment becomes increasingly unpredictable, we have to ask ourselves a question. Will the ultimate survival of these keystone species rely less on discovering brand new, futuristic conservation technologies and more on legally returning the data and the sovereign power to act on it to the very people whose ancestors engineered the first sustainable harvests millennia ago?
It makes you look at that ancient wooden fence spanning the rushing river entirely differently.
It really does.
It is not a relic of the past. When you strap that AI camera to it, integrating local knowledge with machine learning, it becomes the most advanced, most localized, and perhaps the most vital governance tool on the planet. Thank you so much for joining us on this Dump Dive.